Hello and welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul and I am the Professor of Film, and I really enjoy everything to do with film photography. So I've been away for a while, as you will have seen. I haven't made a video for a long time. Life gets in the way sometimes. However, I've decided to come back, and I thought I'd take a slightly different tack, still about film photography, but everything I've been doing up to now has been about the cameras, about developing film, about how to use the camera, apertures, etc, etc. But I've not really spoken about film other than to discuss what different types of film, C41, colour film, black and white film, etc, etc. So I thought maybe it's time to be discussed film more fully so that you understood better why film is important with film photography. With a digital camera, you set your settings and off you go. You can, in some of the modern mirrorless cameras, you can actually set different film types. But what does that actually mean? Do you understand what different film types are? I mean, the reason this came into my head was because I was talking to a young lady who was born in 2000, I mean she's 24 now. She had no idea of what ISO was, or ASA as we called it, or even DIN if you've got an old camera. What does it mean? Good question. How does film work? How does it actually create a negative? Another good question. So I thought I'd tackle those things over the course of the next few videos and go into greater depth so that you understood better. For an example, what sort of film should you be using if you're going out to do landscape photography? What sort of film should you be using if you want to go out and do some street or some architecture? You know, you can choose the film to suit what you want to do. So let's talk about that, and over the course this time round I will be taking the camera out, I'll be taking you with me, and we'll go out and we'll take some pictures with that particular film, and we'll take some pictures as I feel the film should be used, and we'll take some pictures as I feel the film shouldn't be used. But with this video today we're just going to discuss what makes film work, how it works, how you create a negative, and what ISO, ASA and DIN are all about. So, what exactly is film and how does it work? So the best way to describe it is if I show you. So if you have a look here, you'll see this is a sort of sideway view of a very thin piece of film, which is obviously magnified for purposes so that you can see it. And you'll see the very bottom of the film is the sort of foundation layer is a gelatin cellulose mixture, and then below that is basically that's the plasticky bit that's called anti-halation backing. That stops the light moving about inside the film when it's exposed to the light. Above that is your cellulose acetate film base, and then above that is the foundation layer. Then, as you can see, above that is the emulsion. So this is an emulsion that is filled with silver halide crystals, and they're what react to the light, and that's what makes the magic of photography and capturing an image. And then above that is gelatin supercoat, and a lot of it is just to stop the film from building up and warping, so sort of keeps it flat. So really all that matters to us is the gelatin layer which has got the silver halide crystals in. Now the next slide you'll see is the silver halide crystals within the gelatin magnified by 2,500 times. So basically all you're seeing is lots of silver halide crystals that haven't had anything done to them. Now what happens is the light comes into the camera, and where it's the brightest light will turn those crystals, they will stop being clear and they'll turn to black, which is obviously the lightest part because it's a negative, and the parts that are in the darkest parts of the picture, nothing will happen to those. So when it goes through the developing process, the ones that aren't affected will fall off, the ones that turn completely black will be black, and then obviously the ones in the grey tones in between where they're partially turned. And then the next slide you can see what they look like during the process of actually being developed. The slide here is how they actually look when they have been developed. Obviously all magnified 2,500 times. So light comes into the camera, touches the silver halide crystals, they react to the light, then they turn black if it's a bright light, they don't turn colour at all when it's no light at all. And then you get all the tones in between, which are your greys, because let's face it, it's called black and white, but it's not black and white, is it? It's shades of from white through to black, and all the shades of grey in between, and that's what makes a nice black and white picture. Now, the way film works is exactly the same with colour film. The difference is, with colour film, basically you have gels that pick up the different colours. So one will pick up red, and the next one will pick up green, the next one will pick up blue. But that's for another film. This is just about how film works. Now, the next thing you need to understand is what is meant by film speed. Because if you don't know, I can understand that you might think it means it's how fast it goes through the camera. But it's not. Film speed is about how much light it needs to produce a picture. Now, this is where ISO, or we prefer to call it in the film world, ASA. So the ASA is the speed of the film. And it's exactly the same as ISO. It's just that on digital cameras it means the same thing, but it's got a completely different job. So with a film, you have slow films, which means that the camera needs a long time of light coming into the camera to capture the full image. Then you have medium films, which would be somewhere around the region of 100, 200, even these days 400 ASA. And then you have fast films, which would be 800, 1600, and then 3200 ASA. Now, what you've noticed there, as I'm talking, you obviously have films that are 125, etc. But 100 ASA, and then you've got 200 ASA, which is twice as fast as 100 ASA, which is one full aperture f-stop. And you have 400 ASA, which is twice as fast as 200 ASA, which again is twice as fast as 100 ASA. So you see how it works. So basically all the filmmakers and all the camera companies all got together and used ASA, American Standard Association, which means that everybody uses the same measure, so that when you put the film in your camera, your light meter in your camera or your light meter in your hand will know that that 200 ASA film is exactly the same as 200 ASA film made by Kodak, made by Fuji, made by whoever. They're all the same. That's why it's ASA, American Standard Association. So, now you understand what ASA is, let's talk about the actual speed films and why films have different speeds. So, if we have a look at this example, this is an example of a picture taken with a very slow speed film. So we're talking 65 ASA or 50 ASA. Now, that means that if you've got that and you put that into a light meter, you'll see that if you set your camera on a bright day, you're going to need probably twice as long with the shutter open. And don't forget, we're talking 1/25th, 1/60th, 1/30th. So if it's a 60th at 100 ISO, which is a medium film speed, and you've got a 50, then it's going to be 1/30th of a second with using the same aperture. So the difference of why you have these different speeds is because of different grain sizes. This is now you can discover how grain actually works and why film photography is so special, and you don't get this with digital cameras. So, a slow film has very small silver halide crystals, and because they're so small, they're going to capture far more detail, like on a 20 megapixel camera compared with a 10 megapixel camera. You're going to capture more detail. However, with the film, because the crystals is much smaller, it takes longer for the film to react to the light. So it needs more time to capture the picture, all the detail. Now if we go to 200 ISA film, the silver halide crystals are larger, which means that they don't need as much light, and they can capture the image in less time. However, the detail's not going to be quite as fine. And with 400 ASA film, the crystals are going to be larger again, and it's going to need less light, half as much light as it does for 200. And then 800, the crystals are going to be pretty big, and they're going to need half as much time as a 400, or a quarter of the time of a 200. The difference is that these films are going to have grain in them because the crystals are larger. It's like when you take a picture that's been JPEG'd and made small on your Photoshop or whatever you use, and then you blow it up, you can start to see the crystals, see the pixels, and they're clunky, and you can actually see the pixels in the picture. Well, think of it like that with a fast film. So you're actually seeing the grain. Now, one of the things that as film photographers in this day and age is we like grain. When you see them advertising films, your camera shops are advertising films, they say this has got a nice grain. Whereas the camera manufacturers or film manufacturers in the 1990s, just before digital came along, were trying to produce faster and faster films with less and less grain. Exactly the same as digital camera makers now are producing faster and faster, higher and higher ISOs with less and less noise, because we're all trying to achieve to take that picture in a dark place, but with a faster shutter speed as possible. However, having said all of that, the grain actually works for us, doesn't it? There's even more to this. It gets far more complicated because when you use your developing process, you can change the film speed in the developer, and that's more to do with contrast. However, there's especially, you'll hear people talking about pushing a film. That means that it might be an ASA film, but they've gone out and it's been a really dark, miserable day and they want to take some pictures of a sporting event, maybe a football match or something, and there's just not enough light for them to be able to get the fast enough shutter speeds, even with, and they've got to have, obviously, be in focus. They're looking at f5, 6, f8. They can't get a fast enough shutter speed. So then they tell the camera that they're using 400 ASA film. So now the camera from 200 to 400, and the camera will now work with that, so they get that faster shutter speed. From that, they can say to the development, when they have the film developed, so they can develop the film themselves, they can look up in a table to see what it means if that film has been developed at a stop more. So if that 200 film, you developed it at 400, you can go and have a look in the paperwork, or say to the guy that's going to develop it for you at the shop, I push the film 1 stop, or I push the film 2 stops. And the development with that, obviously, it's not going to be as good as if you've done it at the right thing, or if you've gone out and bought 400 ASA film. Now let's see, now we're getting into picking the right film for the job. So I hope that's made sense. I hope that it doesn't get too complicated, because it is quite involved, but I think it is worth understanding the basics of how film works, so that later on down the line, as I make more of these videos, you'll understand more and more how it works. So like I say, it's the same with colour film. So film speed is about the size of the silver halide crystals. So the faster the film, bigger the crystals, the grainier the picture will be. And don't forget, when you magnify a picture, the grain increases inside as well. So if you're using a 35mm film, and you see the size of the negative, if you put that in an enlarger and blow it up, the bigger you're going to blow it up, the larger the grain is going to be. So if you're going to take a picture with a 35mm camera and you're going to blow that picture up to 20 inches by 16 inches, then the grain obviously is, if it's a 200, 400 ASA film, the grain is going to show more. In fact, it was quite arty back in the 70s where people were using 800 ASA film and getting quite high grain and then blowing it up to a 20 by 16, so it was just really, really grainy, which was quite artistic. We all had different things we were doing. However, having said all of that, I hope you now understand. The faster the film, the more the grain. So with grain, you don't get as much detail. And I think that's one of the interesting things with film photography is, with digital photography, when I'm watching the videos about guys saying how to take pictures and what have you, everybody's in America talking about tack sharp images, or in Britain pin sharp images, and how important it is to have it pin sharp, and it's got to be pin sharp in the middle and pin sharp on the edge, and if you bought that particular lens and it's not sharp all over, blah 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 blah. Well, when you've got a film camera and you're talking about grain, the more grain you've got, the less sharp the image is going to be, because the less details there's going to be. So it doesn't really matter, well, it does matter what sort of lens you've got. Obviously the glass on the front of the camera is more important than the camera itself, generally speaking. However, having said those things, if you're using a 1600 ASA film, then it's going to be grainy, and you're not going to have those pin sharp details you can't have. But I think that's what film photography is all about. I hope I haven't waffled too much. I hope it all made sense to you. I hope the pictures that came along with it helped. And like I say, I think now from now on, I'm going to get the cameras. We're going to use different cameras. We're going to use different film types, and we're going to go out. You're going to come with me, and I'm specifically going to shoot for that type of film that we're using, so that you can understand what type of film to use. Because there's so much today with just people buying film, they don't really know what they're buying. So if you understand the ASA, you understand the film stock, and you understand what you're going to get, then, you know, me personally, I rather like films. Have a look at Saul Leiter's work. Have a look him up on the internet, and Google him and see the sort of pictures he took. That's what I like to take. And we'll be doing some of that. But also, obviously, we're doing quite a bit of black and white, and we're using different types of cameras. So, if you enjoyed it, please do like, please do subscribe, and click the bell icon so that you don't miss any of these videos that will be coming up in the future. Do have a look at the videos I've made before if you're new to the channel. And if you want to, please do share it. If you're on a forum with other people who like film photography, then please do share so that I can get out there to more people. I've got to the stage now where I've made so many cameras and brought them back to life. There ought to be a lot of people out there that are enjoying their film photography. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.